Hello, Graham Vincent, violin maker, musician. I'm 60, nearly 61 years old, and I've been working in workshops on and off since I was, like 14, 15, I guess. And I have 10 fingers. Now, I'm not a safety expert, but I just want to go through some of the things that's helped me keep 10 fingers. I would say, look, there's a plaster on a finger. That's actually because I'm trying to deal with this horrible wart that I've got on my finger, which is driving me nuts, basically. It's nothing to do. I haven't cut myself recently, not recently. So, should we start with the simple stuff? Like I say, I'm not an expert. I'm just simply going to go through what's made me safe. My hands have got lots of little scars over them. I've not been without my little battles on the way. First of all, this is a chisel. This has got a really sharp end on it. I'm going to put this down and I'm going to pretend this is the chisel, because that way I'm not going to cut myself, okay? Basic things: knives, chisels, anything with a really sharp blade on it that you hold in one hand and you hold a piece of wood. Do not cut towards your soft fleshy bits, because this thing that's so sharp that it will cut into a piece of wood easily will cut into your soft fleshy bits really, really easily. And I've got various scars. Some of the ones I remember most vividly are a couple of little scars across the top of these fingers here, which were me at about the age of 9 whittling with a penknife on a beach in Wales. And that was the start of me learning that you don't cut towards yourself. I've got other scars, like one here, where I was sawing and I ended up doing this, and lo and behold, I cut myself. So do not cut towards yourself. If you have something which can't avoid cutting towards yourself, you think, stop and work out how to hold it so you won't have to cut towards yourself. It's as simple as that. Don't do it. Secondly, the same thing kind of applies to machines in a way. So let me move this to a machine. This is not running. I wouldn't demonstrate with it running. I'd do something stupid otherwise. If you imagine I want to cut that piece of wood, if I have my hand there, cut towards myself, I will hurt myself. You have to kind of imagine the cut in the piece of wood and make sure that your hands, that your soft fleshy bits are well and truly moved away from that. If I was cutting along here, I would probably cut like this just to start it off. And once it was going past the blade, I would actually hold it on the other side of the blade and be pushing it away. So that's how I keep my fingers away from this. I also do things like anchor down and actually move simply by moving part of my hand, so to speak. One of the best ways to think of this is you've got to imagine what would happen if the piece of wood disappeared. And if you find you're in a position like this, if the piece of wood isn't there, you're doing it wrong and you will lose your thumb one day. You need to be working in a way that you think, well, if the piece of wood wasn't there, what would happen? And in that situation, quite clearly, I'd be fine. If I was pushing that way, if I was holding the piece of wood beyond the blade and pushing, I'd be fine. That's a really good way of analysing what you're doing. What would happen if the piece of wood wasn't there? Circular saw, same question. What would happen if the piece of wood just suddenly disappeared? If you find you're in a position where you're pushing towards the blade, if the piece of wood wasn't there and you ended up in the blade, you're doing something wrong. There's so many things to say about the circular saw. It's a really dangerous machine. It's so easy to cut bits of your body off. And also I see on YouTube so many people using them badly. It absolutely terrifies me. First of all, I always use push sticks. And look at the ends of my push sticks. You see how they have been cut into in the blade. Obviously, I'm a little bit less careful with the end of the push stick than I would be with my fingers, but you are so much better off if that sort of damage is on the end of a piece of stick that you can throw away rather than on the end of your thumb. So by using a push stick, you can always keep your fingers and hands well away from that blade. Yeah, I mean, there are other rules that apply, but the fundamental one is keep your hands away from the blade by using push sticks. Imagine what would happen if the piece of wood disappeared. Is your hand pushing towards it? Absolutely key. Right, there are other things that I see with with a circular saw which really scare me on the internet. Most American YouTube channels and many others that I see seem to disregard completely using a riving knife and also a crown guard. They are there for a very good reason. This one also has extraction built into it. That's something else we'll talk about. Fundamentally, the main purpose of the riving knife isn't to get in your way, it's to stop the timber binding up on the blade. If that timber binds up on the blade, it will then be lifted up and thrown forward. And that's the crown guard performs a couple of functions. One is obviously it protects you should you stumble onto the blade or something. You're not going to have a nasty accident. But one of the most important jobs it does is it actually stops bits of wood being picked up and thrown forward, because in the same way that the riving knife stops the wood clamping on the back of the blade, this, if it does clamp on the blade, stops it being picked up and thrown around. It holds it down. So this crown guard and this riving knife, to me, are absolutely critical things. They really are very important. So much more to say about the circular saw, but those are the basics. Don't push any soft, fleshy part of your body towards it. Keep your fingers well away by using push sticks. Please use a crown guard. Please use a riving knife. Please use extraction. We'll get to extraction in a bit. Over my bench here, I have this simple inline bathroom fan. And when I'm working on the bench, doing something that produces any dust, I will simply put that somewhere near it. And dust on my bench, when it's rising from any work, just rises up and whoosh, up the hole, basically. So I'm not breathing it. You'll also find my workshop fairly well equipped with respirators, I think we call them, don't we? Face masks. Now these have both of these have a dust filter on the outside. I think this one's, as far as I remember, is an activated charcoal filter, and this one is something similar. I can't remember. Volatile organics, possibly. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But they both perform the function very well of taking fine dust out of the atmosphere. So what I breathe in doesn't contain any fine dust. I've got quite a few friends who are in the similar sort of businesses, and I've got two of my friends now have died from nasal cancer, from wood dust, basically. So, you know, it's not a joke. It is serious. As I say, I haven't spent a fortune on dust extraction now. I mean, that inline filter is a cheap way of doing it. When I'm using something like the lathe, for example, I use a cheap second-hand vacuum cleaner, an eBay, what do you call them, cyclone, which, I mean, you don't need the cyclone and the additional filter, but fundamentally I will work with one hand on the lathe and holding a sort of the vacuum pipe against, nearby, basically, so dust just disappears rather than going into the atmosphere. Similar thing over here on sanders. I always use them with dust extraction and also wear masks at the same time. In the summer, I tend to have the workshop door open, and I will often have the fan on, just so basically there's a good circulation of air through the place. All helps. The other thing you can do to stop yourself cutting yourself with sharp blades and so on, I mean, these are interwoven with metal fibre, I think it is. But I mean, these are apparently about 4 times as tough as leather, so I use them occasionally. I also use that occasionally. I have these two sort of sleeves, which are, was it mylar or something? I can't remember now. But again, these are really tough anti-cut sort of things. And same as that first set of gloves, same sleeves for the same purpose. But that's all very well and good. It's far better to be working in a safe way so you're not cutting towards yourself. But, you know, there are some things where I do kind of put those on because I mean, for example, sometimes I'm cutting cardboard, for example, using a knife, for example. And I will often pop on these when I'm doing that. So, you know, for some specific tasks, they're very useful. But there is something that does need to be said about gloves and stuff like that, and that is they get caught in machinery. So do not assume that you can disregard safety on a bandsaw, on a circular saw, on a router or something simply because you're wearing tough gloves, because what might actually happen is the machinery gets caught in the material and you can't get your hand away from the cutting edge. So, you know, you've got to consider carefully where and when you use those. It's far better always to be using safe practices that keep your hands away from traveling into the blade and keep them at some distance from anything that's, you know, capable of cutting. Eyes. Yeah, I mean, anytime I'm using machine, you'll see me putting these on, basically. Need I explain more? I mean, it's fairly obvious, isn't it? Just a simple pair of reading glasses is going to stop you doing things like poking yourself in the eye, you know, with a chisel or something, which does, you know, can happen. But anytime when there's anything which has kinetic energy, then you'll find me wearing good protective glasses. None of these things are expensive. Then ears, your ears. I often will be found in the workshop with a pair of musicians' earplugs in, which they're called musicians ones because they have, as far as I'm aware, because they're set up in such a way that they attenuate the sound more evenly across the sort of frequency range, so it sounds more like the original sound, but obviously just a lot quieter. And also have a pair of really high specification, like massively thick earmuffs. I also have a pair of Bluetooth noise cancelling headphones, which I sometimes wear. Probably in the workshop, hearing protection is one of the things that gets attended to more than anything else. But please, you know, consider all these other things as well. Well, that's kind of all I wanted to say, really. It feels like it's been a bit of a disjointed kind of video. I hope you found it useful. Please like and subscribe if you haven't. It's just, this is so important. It really is. Keep yourself safe. Keep yourself safe in the workshop, because being in the workshop is one of the most wonderful things. And you don't want to go spoiling it for yourself, I guess. Anyway, look after yourselves. Cheers, folks. Bye.